Well, happy Better Than Canada Day, certainly. Also, happy You're Not France on Fire Day, since I just popped in from, Yiz's, discussion of what's going on in France and apparently now in Belgium as well. Mhm. Big brother Bezic is watching us. Oh, lovely. Can you hear me? If you can, I will sing the, glorious national anthem. America! Fuck yeah!
All right, that should have fixed it. Should have. Well, let's see what chat screeches at about me this time. All right, can you all hear me now?
Glorious national.
Yeah, clearly they can't. Should have. Well, let's see what chat screeches at about.
That's unfortunate.
Oh, good, they can hear me finally. I can save you all for the third American national anthem.
Well, personally, I think, it's a great way to drive people to the Sultan's Subscribe Star.
Hey,
Pay us or I'll keep singing.
hey, wait a minute. Okay. Well, yeah. So to roll this back. So yeah, happy 4th of July to anybody that's everybody, and because you're here, you have to be somebody, whether you want to be or not. So
Indeed.
yeah, because I was driving around thinking about what exactly to do, and I personally blame not a Robert Cat for this even happening, just because he was bullying me into doing a stream today. So he gets to suffer. Ha. But yeah, so I was just kind of thinking, well, what would be a fun thing to do? And then I was like, well, what's something that isn't being done a lot? And I started thinking about, one of the big traditions in American history was to read the Constitution. Yeah, what, not the Constitution. Well, we do that too, but read the Declaration of Independence, and that reading actually started as a big deal on July 8th, 1776. So I kind of figured it'd be a bit of fun to just kind of recreate some of those older traditions, because they kind of died out during the hippies, where it wasn't cool to be, yeah, patriotic. Oh, it's all nationalism, boo. It's like, nah, yeah, go fuck off. Um, yeah. So I started, drifting around looking through things to do, and I was originally going to record the audio myself, but considering how terrible a reader I am when it comes to this sort of thing, I figured, well, we might just do a little bit something extra. And
Sounds like a plan.
it is. So I actually found some copyright-free, LibriVox recordings, and then I thought to myself, what's even more fiery than the Declaration of Independence? The speech by Patrick Henry of "Give me liberty or give me death." So figured, we might just go ahead and start with that speech. And
That sounds like a very good place to start, to be honest.
because honestly, when you hear this speech, it's about 9 minutes long. It's an amazing speech, and I think I think chat would enjoy it, because hell, I mean, I've listened to it 4 times already, and it just gets me all sorts of excited. So, here we go.
No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as abilities, of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights.
I don't
And
hear
therefore,
anything at the moment.
I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen.
Yes,
Possibly
I am
your audio switch
boomering
needs
the
to be.
hell out of it.
Yeah, we share that in common. I'm surprised I haven't boomered into deleting my entire content yet.
Yeah. That's... Well, I noticed you have a secondary. All right, so we'll try this.
No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as abilities, of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time, through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason toward my country, and of an act of disloyalty towards the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth, and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men, engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves and the House. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array, if its purpose be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what have we to oppose to them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon this subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and Parliament. Our petitions have been slighted, our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult, our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain after these things may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have so long been contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have so long been engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight! I repeat it, sir, we must fight! An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have us bound hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which the God of nature hath placed in our power. The millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, and the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come! I repeat it, sir, let it come! It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death!
So that was one of the great speeches one of the great firebrands of American history.
That was definitely rousing.
I mean, where the hell are these men today? And women, if you want to go that way. Yeah. Yeah, it's just... And this speech was it 1774, 17... Yeah, it was 1775. So things had already started kicking off, essentially. And... Yeah. That speech alone, from March 23rd, 1773, or 1775, sorry. Yeah, so, sorry. Yeah, I just can't imagine listening to that and not wanting to take up arms and overthrow your oppressors.
Yeah. Well, I won't Fed post here.
Hey, it's a historical context.
Yeah. It definitely stirs the spirit to action, to say the least.
Well, and I think the thing that really struck me, because I think everybody had heard, the "Give me liberty or give me death" part.
Yeah.
But how many of us are familiar with that kind of ending section where it's already upon us? Those who are opting for peace do so at the risk of liberty and of forging the chains of their slavery. Whew. Yeah. And let's see. Yep. And Marku, if speeches today were this passionate, I would pay more attention to them. Yeah, hell, even half as passionate as this.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. Sometimes your current head of the country tries to get this sort of level of passion into his voice, but it doesn't quite ring the same as something like Patrick. And it wasn't even Patrick Henry speaking just then, but
no,
it's the words themselves are so powerful and so well put together that it doesn't matter whether it's the original person saying them, because they're interpreted so easily by the new person reading them.
And it's funny, you and I'll pull the text up for chat to see. But
speaking of chat, I'll just respond to Callum Dayton real quick. Callum says that someone like that today is impossible. I would posit that someone like that is absolutely needed today. Someone who will get that fiery and that passionate in their speech, because there's a desperate lack of it right now.
Yeah. Well, it's
Blackout has a good point. Oh, there's lots of passionate speakers right now. They're just full of crap.
Yeah. And Maureen, never heard the speech before. As far as I know, it's surprising to suddenly hear the part I was familiar with. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to play that. It's such an important reflection of kind of American culture at that time, and really to this day. I think a lot of our political division come from this spirit of that line about gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. That's kind of the way a lot of people feel now, and it's not just one side. It's split down the middle, as it usually is. And
there's I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to mention that there's a line that he uses, and I need to find it back in chat when I commented on it. He was saying how argument doesn't seem to be working, or words to that effect.
Yep.
And it's kind of interesting, because we've kind of seen now how history starts to rhyme. And for those of us on, I'll call it our side for the sake of simplicity, because there's so many different potential sides for us to be on. that we've kind of come around to the point where, okay, clearly we're not getting anywhere just talking and trying to be as civil as possible. And in a bit of a terrifying way, it's almost like we're approaching that sort of inflection point again where some form of revolution has to occur. Now, ideally it wouldn't be a violent one, but
Yeah.
that's part of the reason that I talk as much as I do in places like your channel, Yiz's channel, places like that, because I want to try and use my voice to stave off any possibility of violence.
Exactly. And, I consider myself a bit of a firebrand, more in private than I am in public. But it's for the exact
Mm,
same reason, because we need to have these thoughts and opinions expressed freely. But
yeah,
we don't need them to escalate. But if we can express ourselves as well as, kind of temper the ends, we can really, I think, force good out of all of this. But until people are willing to have those discussions where you need to kind of verbally slap someone upside the head, uh, then we're just going to continue to swirl and wallow in misery and escalate things to the point of violence. And I don't want
grants.
that to happen.
Yeah, well, we're kind of seeing what happens if people cease to be involved in the political process too much. Like it's fine to be concerned about your family and your job and your local area and things like that, but one of the things that we're seeing now, especially with places like France, is that only goes so far. It is incumbent on, how to put it, well-meaning citizens to get involved rather than simply say no, it'll be fine, because clearly the room is on fire and quite a lot of us are still sitting there going, no, this is fine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. The number of conversations I have with people out there is they want to avoid the hard questions, and they also want to be polite. As surprising as it is amongst us Yanks. Yeah, I just
Well, yeah, there's a cultural through line, I guess, from the UK to the US to Canada and most of the West, where we generally tend to conduct ourselves in very civil, very polite ways, and that works fine amongst ourselves. But when we start encountering people from other cultures who have different ways of dealing with each other, for example, one of my more enjoyable things that I've ever done was to actually go to a open air market, a flea market in BC, where I had the fun of haggling with an Arab. Oh my God, those guys get angry. It was so much fun.
yeah.
But it was a matter of I had already encountered Arabs and haggling with them before, so I understood that it was really more in the nature of a game or a sport for them rather than they were actually trying to be angry or not exactly violent, but the words were somewhat violent towards me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had no issue dealing with that, but it was a matter of having to understand the culture that I was dealing with.
And once that moment when you realize it's a game to them, they're going to absolutely rake you through the coals trying to get the best price. But if you know how to play the game, yes, it gets hot, it gets very heated. But at the end of the day, you both walk away. It's like, I cheated the other guy out of whatever we're haggling over.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because really that sort of mental attitude still exists with the Westerners, but it's couched much more gently. Like it's more of a finding a balance. Whereas with the Arabs that I've dealt with, at least, and some of the Greeks, and actually Maureen will appreciate this. I once went to a computer repair shop that was run by a Dutchman when I lived in Alberta, and on the back wall behind the counter, it there was a sign that read basically, "Haggling with a Dutchman is like wrestling with a pig in the mud. You're both going to get dirty, but only one of you is really enjoying it."
Very true.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I just I really wish people in the West understood at the core fundamental level that we use politeness as a weapon, not just well, we'll just get along to have fun. It's like, no, it's a weaponized form of combat. Very civil, but it's also very, very violent and destructive if done incorrectly. So, yeah. Well, I think for the next piece, just to kind of get the boilerplate side of things out, unless you want to talk about Patrick Henry's speech a little bit more, I think we'll move on to the Declaration of Independence, because again, it's a very, and I'm using my polite combat, as it were, to transition into the Declaration.
I do love the chat having a swing at each other. And yes, Maureen, Eric Zamor is a very good speaker. There was a Polish politician too, Jans, I can't remember his last name, a while ago, who was also really good. And the lady from the EU who absolutely castigated Trudeau when he was over there.
Oh, that woman, yes.
Yeah, she's since... Yeah, she's actually since been here to Canada and done some talks with the People's Party here. So it was great for me being a fan. I was actually a founding member of the People's Party. It's been a great experience to see her standing next to Maxime Bernier, who's probably somewhere in the region of libertarian conservative, though more conservative. He's really the only real conservative going in Canada right now. And it was great to see those two kind of palling around and being very friendly with each other. Her first name is Christine, but for the life of me, I can't remember her last name.
I might look that up off the visual line here.
Okay.
But yeah, and that's the thing. You do get these politicians who can do great swelling speeches, whether it's a Zamor or a Patrick Henry or.
And Charles de Gaulle came up in chat there a little while ago as well. I mean, Charles de Gaulle, Jacques Chirac, these guys, the French, the kind of late 20th century French politicians, they were great at stirring crowds. But unfortunately, sometimes you could tell that they were really, really hammered when they were doing it.
Well, maybe that's when the best speeches come out for the French.
Well, some of the inhibitions get lowered, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Being a firebrand and having other things that will lower your inhibitions to make bold, definitive statements are what are really needed these days. Because we get these damned polished politicians out there, and they can spin this tapestry of words, but then I remember the Gettysburg Address. We all know Lincoln made, it was like 3 minutes worth of a speech, and the speaker before him spent 2 hours and nobody can remember his name. Yeah,
and I mean, take somebody like Trump, for example. Doesn't say anything particularly wordsmithy. Like, he doesn't necessarily get particularly eloquent, but everybody comes away from listening to him speak with a strong sense of patriotism. Like, even for me, just listening to him speak kind of turned me a little bit into an American patriot. And I'm Canadian.
Well, and that's the thing. People will make fun of the way Trump speaks from the left.
Yeah.
But it's because he's speaking to the everyman. He's not speaking to the academic elite. He's speaking to the average citizen. And that's
and he's speaking in their language too. Yeah.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, how often do you get, these very eloquent, very polished speeches and not sit there and want to poke holes in it? When we did the State of the Union address, I mean, how fiery did that get in response, where other presidents who've done speeches much earlier, where it was a very simple, very straightforward speech, a very common man speech, and that those always carry far more weight.
Yeah, and one of the things with Trump too is he always seems sincere.
Yeah.
Right, like he never seems like he's pausing to order his thoughts or taking a moment to try to put things into, I suppose, grander language. He just speaks, and he speaks so much off the cuff and from the heart. You kind of it draws you in.
Yeah. Yeah. And those kind of speakers that we've all heard that were can cite almost verbatim from time to time. They're the ones that people rally to, that get things done, that will change nations. And the eloquent speakers are the ones that nobody remembers after after they have done the damage that they're going to do.
That's true. Yeah, if you're too practiced, too polished, sometimes it takes away from getting the message out there the way you want it to get out.
Indeed. Yeah. It's funny. As surprising it is, Ronald Reagan was an excellent speech maker, but
He was, yeah.
I think he, from his acting, I always thought, well, he should, sound a lot more stilted than he is, but clearly not. I mean,
I kind of wonder what it was like in California when Reagan was acting, like what the society was like, because I don't know a lot about that era in that place.
So,
But I wonder if it wasn't far more based than, well, it clearly was far more
it
based than
was
it is
far
now.
more based. You watch some of the older movies, through the historical lens, and you can pick up where, they're inserting some progressive politics here and there, but they're not beating you over the head with it. And overall, I can't remember if it was Reagan or another actor that was famously friends with Henry Fonda, who was a rabid left wing man, but because they had been able to get over the politics and get down to the brass tacks of actually being friends, they were able to move past that other stuff. And that, I think, is what's severely lacking now. Is nobody wants to put aside their sword, as it were. They really want to go out and kind of bludgeon you over the head rather than actually figure out what you're having to say. It's kind of like,
Yeah. They would much rather beat you into submission than encourage you to cooperate. That's probably the best way I can think to put it when it comes to modern speech makers.
Yeah, yeah. It's not persuasion; it's obligation to obey.
Yeah, it's more of a harangue a lot of the time, especially with Biden, for instance. I mean, he's
No.
constantly just haranguing people. It's like, dude, you're not a Jewish grandmother. Stop trying to guilt us into things.
Yeah, he is definitely by far one of the worst speakers publicly I've ever heard. When it comes, there's
And that's assuming he wasn't plagiarizing his speech.
Well, yeah. Let's see. And Maureen, you need to be passionate. If you're able to choose all of your words carefully, you're not passionate, you're calculating. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
So, we will continue with the cavalcade of Americana, and we will have
this
the
pleases my
declaration.
trans-Texan soul.
It should. It very
Or
much should.
actually, more like trans-Tennessean these days.
It's better and more temperate.
The Declaration of Independence of the 13 Colonies in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them, and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offences, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighbouring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislatures have been answered only by repeated injury over us. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably disrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. Disrupt our connections. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, to the voice of General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states; that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved; and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Alrighty. Now, sorry
That
about
was
any audio problems. I couldn't actually hear it coming through YouTube, so.
Yeah, even read as monotonously as it was, it's still very moving.
Yeah, yeah. It just the elements that it went through just really touched on. I think all of the touchstones which were eventually resolved in the Constitution, then subsequently fucked up, but still.
Yeah, the brotherhood aspect of it as well. Like we've called upon them under the bonds of consanguinity, consanguinity, and like a shared heritage, things of that nature. I mean, somebody in the chat, and I'll scroll back and see who it was that said it, but yeah, it was Callum Dayton who said these words would be such heresy today.
Oh yeah, yeah. To even fathom these lines, just it boggles my mind that people would be this aggressively against it.
Yeah, it's indicative of just the whole intent of a lot of the elite now is just to completely separate everybody from everybody else, and it's that whole divide and conquer strategy that we need to kind of avoid to fight against as much as possible.
Yep. Yeah. No, no, Bobcat. Isn't my first live stream. This is my first live stream in 4 months, and I had to rebuild OBS from the ground up. But yeah, back to the Declaration. It's going through some of the lines, and I want to say, depriving in many cases the benefits of trial by jury. That's that's an amazing indictment.
Yeah. There's another line I'm just looking at now. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. I mean, just the wording of that alone would have some lefties just exploding heads at this point. Oh, manly! How dare you? That's toxic masculinity being suggested.
Yeah, yeah. And yet, another great line. Yeah, he has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
Yeah.
And then we get, impressment that leads up to the War of 1812. It's just it's a fascination repetition of what was going on there, and then nowadays we have this happening again. And personally, my favorite line, and I think the line that's most relevant to this day, in every of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have only been answered by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Yeah, I mean, now he could be talking about any number of supposed world leaders.
Yeah, I mean, hell, look at the Dutch farmer problem. They've been petitioning for redress, and what happened? Well, now we know.
Yeah, they ended up taking the route that I generally suggest: get involved in politics and take over.
Yeah, and the best revolutions are the ones that happen at the ballot box.
Yep, the gentlest ones certainly.
Yes. Well, and the ones that tend to have the most immediate impact. Because
I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, from 1775 or 1774, if you want to get really technical, to 1783, the American Revolution was being waged, and that's quite a while. That's almost 10 years, before
Oh.
peace came back. And then even at that stage, it was rather long road to get to the Constitution after the Articles of Confederation.
If Bezic isn't wrong, we do know what happened.
Yes.
And just because it's the day that it is, I'd like to say, for posterity's sake, honk. Let us never forget the great honking of Canada.
Yeah, the gloriousness of the honk.
And I mean, it was kind of hilarious to hear people in Ottawa going, "Oh, I'm getting PTSD from all the honking," or this is a violent attack upon our peaceful city. Like, no, look at France. That's what a violent attack on a peaceful city looks like.
Indeed.
Right? These people are trying to work within the system as set to change the way things are going, because they can't find any other redress by contacting the government, by emailing their politicians. They're being ignored. So, of course, they're going to do something more. Action will escalate.
And that's the damn shame of it all. We shouldn't have to escalate these things.
No, we absolutely should not. But as I often lament, if duty and honor still existed, or at least were still valued the way they should be, we wouldn't be in this mess anyway.
True. And and I just find it so amazing that we have the weight of the ages put on us all. You know, past generations have culminated to this level of duty and responsibility we have for both the history of our peoples and for the future of mankind. And what are we doing? We're failing every step of the way. This will not be seen as a Renaissance moment. This will be seen as capitulation to darkness.
Yeah, I tend to be the eternal optimist in a lot of situations, and even I'm getting to the point of seeing no way out but the hard way.
Mm. Damn. So, yeah, that's one hell of a thing that we're having to. Hell, I don't even know if struggle is quite the right thing, but it's definitely up there. Yeah. But this is supposed to be a happy day, so we're going to continue with the positives of the American Independence Day. And I think one of the...
Well,
okay.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay, well, I was going to say one of the big positives that came out of it is that America showed the world that you can stand up to a massive empire and win.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I actually decided to grab a map of the battles of the Revolution. It's not complete, but it's rather significant. And so few of them, relatively speaking, the larger battles were continental victories. Now, you could say, well, it's more a war of attrition, and that's what it was. But the fact that the American army, as it was, could be defeated so many times, especially before 1779, and yet still reconstitute itself, pun intended, and still go back in and continue to fight. And yeah, it's remarkable. I have some family history with it, and they came out of Maryland, joined a German-only speaking company, eventually rolled into a excuse me, they were not at Valley Forge, but they were at the year after. So he ended up going and serving with the Maryland line at Monmouth Courthouse, didn't really end very well. It wasn't a loss, but it was not a success. Was sent down to Camden, South Carolina under, was it Clinton or Lincoln? I think it was Lincoln, General Lincoln. And he was so stupid that he decided to face the British Continental Line under Cornwallis in a set-piece battle like it was in Europe. Utterly got decimated, and then my ancestor, he ended up as a prisoner of war, was being marched to Charlestown, now Charleston, South Carolina, for a prison hold. He got rescued by Francis Marion, rejoined the remnants of his regiment in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then proceeded to fight at the Battle of Cowpens. And then after they defeated Tarleton, at the Bloody Ban, as he was known, they had what was called the Race to the Dan, where they were basically just ahead of Cornwallis's army all the way from Cowpens, South Carolina, to well across the Virginia line. And they made it with about 6 hours before the British caught them on the Dan River. And they'd stolen all the boats and burned them to get the army across. And then they ended up returning to Guilford Courthouse for the final battle of that portion of the Southern campaign. And that's where Cornwallis famously fired into his own men, which is depicted in the movie The Patriot. And that led ultimately to his surrender at Yorktown. I mean, I don't know
I need
how
to
many...
rewatch The Patriot, I think.
It's a bad movie, but it's good in certain details. And Bobcat's pointing out, Washington actually lost or retreated from more battles than he won, but he chose the important ones and committed to winning them. Yeah, it was about preservation of the army. And, I think, really, Saratoga was probably one of the greatest northern victories during the American Revolution. And because Benedict Arnold felt like he was slighted, he turned traitor. It's amazing what little ego stroking will do. So, but, this is one of the more interesting time periods I study. I've done portraying this at museums and things like that. So it's been a lot of fun. But I think a lot of people miss just how close many times the American Revolution came to failing. So.
Yeah, as I understand it, there were quite a few times where it was a skin of the teeth kind of pull out a success sort of deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, the one I referenced. The only way it ended up in a draw for the British in this case was the fact that they withdrew from the field, which was unheard of at that time. But if you look at like Brooklyn Heights or White Plains or Bunker Hill and all those early battles, even the occupation of Philadelphia and Brandywine, there were always like these little moments where had the colonial armies, the Continental Line, been a little bit more experienced or a little bit more toughened, could have made a difference. But we're talking mostly, as far as soldiers go, most of them had been farmers, merchants, blacksmiths. Not a lot of them had any professional soldiering prior to. Officer Corps was a mix, but your rank and file soldier, very little had experience other than maybe on the frontier fighting off a Indian raid.
Oh, okay. Actually, I just want to get a little note on this map because there's no legend available.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing the yellow dots with the different colors around them. some are blue, some are red. I'm going to assume that the blue are American victories, the red are then British victories, and then the gray ones are kind of undecideds.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
That might be good for the chat to be aware of it, because I know we have a few Europeans in who might not know the history. I'm Canadian, and I don't know the history of most of them anywhere near as well as you would yourself.
Well, yeah, and I'm trying not to make this go deep dive into the history because one, they're probably better, more researched, for each battle than myself, but I know enough of the history to be able to say yes, this happened, that happened,
Yeah.
the overview with the broad strokes.
Yeah. Callum Dayton in chat says, win not the battle, win the war. Victory is not measured in hours or days, but in generations. You mentioned before how long the actual Revolutionary War lasted, and that's most of a decade. I mean, back then, that was a very, very significant chunk of a generation, maybe even half of a generation.
Yes.
That's a lot of people who were basically born into war, or at the very least, the war was ongoing when they became conscious of it.
Correct.
And ended up fighting in it.
Yeah, I mean, well, for my ancestor, he and his father joined at the same time, and then ended up, the father died, but the youngest brother joined in his place, and so you have, basically, two whole generations fighting in that war. Now, overlap with the ages, yes, but the younger brother was, I think he was about 6 or 7 years old when his older brother joined, and then he joined in the 7-year-old joined in 1781. Never saw action, but he went to the local depot, was trained, and then the Battle of Yorktown happened.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating story to follow, and I'm glad I was able to share it outside of my own circle of immediate friends in real life. So
yeah,
you get tons of these kinds of stories. It's not unique. It's just fascinating when you actually can follow some of the lines.
Yeah, and I mean it's definitely one of those things where it's the sort of history that should be absolutely preserved, because I mean it's probably not written in a lot of books. It's definitely not taught in schools, but it's so valuable for people to be aware of it that it's really it should almost be not mandatory or obligatory, but somewhere in that region to talk about these sorts of things, not just in your own family, or your own friend circle, but to kind of share that with people in your community and people in your country in general. Because I mean, the sort of struggles that your country went through to get the independence should be preserved. Like the tales should be known.
And that's where I get into the folklore and the family history and that kind of stuff very heavily, because the myths, the legends, and the tall tales all kind of paint a picture of the era, and then when you get the actual hard factual information, it just makes your understanding of those times and those people much more interesting, because you look at just a very dry version. I should have that up for where it's like, well, here's this date, here's that date. It's like, yes, it's interesting knowledge to have, but it doesn't give you information on who was there. You don't feel people's stories. And
yeah, the statistical date, battle, winner sort of thing. It's very dry, and it doesn't really tell a lot of stories or a lot of detail. And to get the story out of it, oftentimes what ends up happening is you need somebody to come in as an author and actually in a sense, dramatize these stories.
Yes.
But there's so much drama in them anyway. They don't really they probably don't really need a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the thing that personally has frustrated me for years about history is it's individual stories made up in a grand national or global stage. But we just want to look at the Cliff's Notes, not the actual meat of what's going on. And so many people lose out on a passion for history because of the way it's taught. I mean,
Yeah, I can absolutely attest to that. I mean, the dryness of a history class when I was in high school was just mind-bogglingly boring, especially when you have a teacher who's monotonous and really just reciting from the book. Whereas something like a reenactment or a lot of the YouTubers now that you see talking about little tiny episodes. I saw one, I can't remember what channel it was. It may have been Tick History, it may have been someone else, but they were talking about the Battle of Thermopylae, and it was from uh, a verbal account that had been passed on. And I mean, the detail in it was just absolutely wonderful. Like it talked about, and of course, I can't hope to remember the Greek names, but it talked about how one soldier had fallen, and the soldier beside him had grabbed him up, taken his spear in his hand, and carried him forward so that he wouldn't fall and be shamed.
oh wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And
I'll have to try and find that again because it really was like, and I think it was mostly the YouTuber style that it may have been History Bro, Bo Dade. I don't know for sure,
Bo
but
is very good at that. So
yeah, yeah, and yeah, this account somehow having survived to be written down, and as they were explaining it, the archaeological side of it, the account had been written down only a few months later, apparently.
wow, yeah, yeah, that's amazing to to really kind of get that level of detail. And I feel like I'm making it about my ancestor here that was there, but it's a worthwhile story to tell.
Well,
After he
yeah, I
was
mean, making it about your ancestor absolutely makes it personal and actually infuses it with the passion that only a family member could have. So
exactly.
it's not a bad thing to do by any means.
Well, one of the fascinating things was when he was liberated by Francis Marion. When he returned to his
The
regiment,
Swamp Fox?
yeah.
Oh, awesome! I love the Swamp Fox. I used to love that show when I was a kid. Now Disney won't show it anymore.
Oh, of course.
That's okay. You can find it on YouTube.
No, well, that's good. But yeah, so when he returned to his regiment and he was put on sick leave for about a month, basically they were refitting, but they let him go and stay with a local family. That's how he met his wife.
Oh,
So
awesome!
after the war, he returned to Maryland, got his inheritance which was a horse, rode down, married her, and then moved into Tennessee. So, and her family were all loyalists, if I read the history correctly. So yeah, it's just little family stories like that. I think really kind of personalize it, in such a way that I don't know. You just can't get that in most history books because they'll tell you, here's a famous individual, here's a little battle, remember the dates. Don't care about the men and women who were actually there.
Yeah, yeah. One of the really good uh, performance history that you see now is Sabaton. I mean, I had no idea who, and I've got his first name forgotten now, but his Indian name was Pegamagabo, and he's the subject of "Ghost in the Trenches," the song they do. And this was a Canadian native who went over to the First World War and ended up being the most successful sniper in Canadian history.
Hmm.
And you'll like this. He was using a Ross rifle.
Oh no,
Yeah.
that poor
But
bastard.
the song is all about, yeah, the song is all about one exploit of his where he was basically on his own running ammo and I think medicines to the trenches and back and through no man's land and wasn't discovered.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a fascinating individual.
Mm. But it's guys like Sabaton and people like the history YouTubers and things like that. These are the guys who are actually bringing history to life. I mean, look at Absolute Mad Lads. If you read me the story of Mad Jack Churchill and just read the dry account, it wouldn't have nearly the impact of Dankula's video.
No, no, and I think the visual side of the storytelling is just as important as the presentation, because if you can show someone a photograph of that individual or painting or some image to connect, it just adds so much weight. And Dankula does a fantastic job with his storytelling.
Well, yeah, you're talking about pictures of somebody. I had heard stories of Simo Haya over and over and over, and I was like, okay, but finally one day I went, I need to know what this guy looked like, and then you see pictures of him before and after the war. You're like, oh yeah, no, that guy went through it.
Yeah, yeah, and then especially when you read accounts of him well after the war, if you don't see that picture of him post war, you can't really understand why he's so humble about it. And then when you realize
Yeah,
he knew how close he came to dying, that
yeah.
it just wasn't a big deal to him anymore. So yeah, no, I love
Marku
the
in chat
history.
says one of the stories that he loves is the story of how the national anthem got its lyrics, and yeah, I absolutely love that too, because you
Yes.
can hear the words "the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air," but it doesn't really touch you until you actually read the story and go, "Oh, that's why."
Yeah, yeah. And it's even more impressive when you go there and see the actual fort there, and it's like, oh yeah, I can visualize this even better.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and that's another thing too. Like a lot of historical sites aren't being preserved the way they should be anymore.
very correct, yes, and especially here in America, because, well, I will say in some ways we have preserved our battlefields better than a lot of places. Looking at you, Europe, um, it's also very much like we're letting housing developments and all these other things start to encroach, because there is such a tourist trade in places like Gettysburg or Kings Mountain, and places in Yorktown especially, where we're losing it, but it's taking it's taking a little longer than it could have. But I seeing some of these sites just, yep, here's a plaque, go away, we don't care anymore. It's heartbreaking, but then you need to have the general public understand viscerally the history, and that's not happening like it should.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that happens here in Canada as well. Like they'll put up a war memorial, but the actual battlefield that they're memorializing might have already been bulldozed over and have apartments built on it.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. I, you, I've been to the Battle of Bunker Hill site, and it's just this
Okay.
little knoll with a obelisk that you can climb into. I can't remember the proper name of it, but yeah, it's like you're in the middle of the city, and it's like, wow, this is it. This little maybe acre patch of land is all that. So yeah.
And Bobcat is telling the story of the anthem a little bit in chat.
Hmm. Yep. It's a question. He's on a prison ship during the battle. He can't see out the window, and he's asking another prisoner if the flag is still over the fort. Yep. Yeah, you just can't. you can't make words quite as impactful if you don't have that story. And it's funny, our national anthem is actually one of my it's not my favorite patriotic song, strangely enough. It's actually Hail Columbia, which was actually the original national anthem. Actually, well, since I've got a pause screen, and when you need to go and do other things, Arden, I'll plop that over, and I've got a little bit of a kind of slideshowy kind of thing, because I was bored and I was like, well, there's a lot of pretty places in America that I know our non-American audience would not know, and kind of so I put Hail Columbia over top of it, so we'll
excellent.
Play that as a transition. So
yeah, in that case, actually, since you're looking to do that, I can drop out now, and I'm sure Stormy would appreciate the extra 10 minutes with me. So,
well,
thank you very much for having me on. And as I said at the beginning, happy Better Than Canada Day. And happy 4th, of course.
Yes. Well, thanks for coming, Arden. It's actually made it a lot more lively than it could have been without you. So we will thank you again, and have a great one. And we'll work on extending citizenship up your way.
One way or another. In any case, my friend, you have a good day. I'm going. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hail Columbia, happy land. Hail ye heroes, heaven-born band, who fought and bled in freedom's cause, who fought and bled in freedom's cause. And when the storm of war was gone, enjoy the peace your valor won. Let independence be your boast, ever mindful of its cost, ever grateful for the prize. Let it alter reach the skies. Earth united, let us be, rallying round our liberties, as a band of brothers join. Peace and safety we shall find. Behold the chief who now commands, once more to serve his country stands. The rock on which the storm will beat, the rock on which the storm will beat. But armed in virtue, firm and true, his hopes are fixed on heaven anew. When hope was sinking in dismay, when gloom obscured Columbia's day, his steady mind from changes free resolved on death or liberty. Earth united, let us be, rallying round our liberty, as a band of brothers join. Peace and safety we shall find.
Just a little interlude, although apparently it decided to loop the pictures a lot more than I had intended. I had about maybe 100 or so picked out for the whole thing. And of course it's showing the fun ones now. And you can't see it. Just a little interlude, although apparently at this. So, I think that's kind of towards the end of everything for myself today. I guess I'll open it up to the peanut gallery if there's any historic questions or Americanisms that you find kind of curious and want to know about. You can try to forgive me, Bobcat, but you got to see if I care first. Oh no, Maureen. Those were just 100 pictures that I had just laying around for my various trips to national parks and things like that. Not really a accomplishment. So, yeah, it's actually I probably need to go soon myself, simply because I've got barbecue to make and all sorts of American things to do. We've got a big fireworks display here in town, so I'll probably end up climbing up on the roof like I have for the last 10 years at my house, and I get to watch. So, yeah. So, again, opening up the floor for another, we'll say about 10 minutes or so to get any questions. And I think I will say want to give a shout out to Dan at the Lotus Eaters for giving us Yanks a good roasting, but I'm still microwaving tea in protest. So let's see. Yep. Well, Marku, I mean, actually, that's an interesting little bit of trivia. So, part of the American celebration of the 4th of July Independence Day, along with a reading of the Declaration, it was to go out and fire, and this was typically with black powder rifles, 13 shots, one for each of the colonies. So, it'll be easier to find time for the live streams when you're in a body cast because you fell off the roof. Well, see, Bobcat, I have a one-story house, so I tend, if I fell off, it's going to be out into the grass, luckily, or one of the big bushes, which would probably be worse than anything else. Well, Marku, they can try, but they're gonna have to beat the minute timer. And let's see. Well, and one of the there's an interesting, one of the other interesting traditions, and it's known by everybody, but barbecue and burgers and cooking out and all that. And when I was younger, I was kind of like, well, gee, why are we doing these things? And then I realized it's not just because we're celebrating our independence as a country, but there's also a lot of kind of community focus. Almost every small town in the United States goes out of their way to do something kind of out of the ordinary. And I like that. I like that a lot. It's kind of fun that with as much of the political dregs that we have to deal with, that we still end up coming together to some degree. And that's kind of a nice thing. Kind of a very American thing is, it's like, yeah, we can fight amongst ourselves, but as soon as somebody from the outside comes in and doesn't appreciate it, well, all bets are off. So, actually, Maureen, growing up, I didn't have barbecue in my youth, which really kind of sucked. Now that I think about it, but now that I make my own, it's a fantastic barbecue. It's a Madeira based, actually, Madeira and vinegar, and chilies of various sorts. You have to have paprika in it and some garlic. So, but yeah. Well, of course, Bobcat. I bought quite a few fireworks because I could. And this may shock a few people who haven't seen it, but you can go around to various parking lots of, like, shopping malls or like big convenience stores, and just go and just buy all sorts of fireworks. They're set up in little roving tents. It's kind of nice. I mean, so at Bobcat, fireworks or ammo. I mean, I bought both, but that's neither here nor there. Plus, I've got a black powder rifle, so I might do my 13 shots tonight. So, yeah. And I'm going to do a quick little aside. And here we go. So I will play the common version of our national anthem, and then I think we'll wrap it unless people have other questions. And here we go.